Good morning, Ohio State fans, or afternoon or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. I'm Patrick Murphy here with Bucknuts and 247 Sports. We're going to talk some Nebraska today, Ohio State's opponent this weekend. We're here with Brian Christopherson of our 247 Sports Nebraska site, Husker247. If you like what we do here, we try and do these a lot. Obviously, we have the BM5 with Dave and Dan. Some other podcasts, and Steve and I usually do the post-game show. So if you like what you see here, please like, subscribe, whatever it is, whatever platform you're on. I appreciate it. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. I'm doing better than Nebraska's football record is, so I'm okay.
All right. Well, with that, let's just get into it. I'm going to ask you kind of a bigger picture question here first about Nebraska. It's been a few years of Scott Frost at this point, and the results haven't seemed to change a ton. What's your read on this team as a program, I guess is the better term, and just kind of where things stand with Scott Frost as the head coach and how you see have things improved? Because from the outside, it seems a lot similar to what was going on before in Lincoln.
Yes, it's a very confusing situation because actually they are a better football team this year than they've been at any other point in the Frost era, and I say that pretty decidedly. I think it's obvious when they can go toe to toe with Michigan. They can go toe to toe with Michigan State, Oklahoma. They've been in all those games, but they're also mistake prone enough and miss enough of the details to go lose to Illinois and Purdue and Minnesota. And I'm not acting like Nebraska is at a point anymore where they should just decide they should roll over Minnesota and Purdue. They're not. But the problem is it's a pattern. Like if you had a Purdue 1 week, but you took care of the other games, like, Minnesota and Illinois, people be like, oh, that's okay. But there's all these close losses that have just piled up. And at some point, people just get tired of saying, well, you were almost there. I think they're 5-18 now in one-score games under Scott Frost, which is an amazing stat, So they're in a lot of these contests, and the narrative could be much differently if you had changed 5 or 6 of those along the way, but they haven't. And so at some point, people say, that's who you are. You don't have the solutions to make that extra play, to do that to have that third down where you get off the field in that key moment. And it's always something different, As for what Scott Frost's future is, that's the I guess the $20 million question around here right now. That's what his buyout is. And Trev Alberts is new as the athletic director here in his first season. He has said encouraging things about Frost and seems to be kind of working with him. And I can't tell if they have enough of a chemistry where Trev might look at it like, hey, this is his 4th year here, but it's his first year with me as the AD. Let's see how this plays out. I like what I'm seeing behind the scenes. These tough losses are going to turn around when next year's schedule is more favorable. Or if they're just going to say, you know what, it's been 4 losing seasons in a row. This could end up 4-8, 3-9. You just can't keep somebody or sell that to fans after that. So everybody's got an opinion, but the only one that matters is Trev, and he does a pretty good job. Trev Alberts, that is. He does a pretty good job of keeping it under his vest.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and I've watched some of Nebraska this year, but when Ryan Day pointed out during his Tuesday press conference that Nebraska hadn't lost a game by more than 8 points, I guess I knew that because I'd seen it, but I watched the Oklahoma game. I watched the Michigan State overtime game, the Michigan game. It just that's an astounding statistic to me that a team that record is what it is, but it's been so close against some really good teams. Do you find that encouraging? Do you find that, like you said, more of the same pattern? I mean, what's kind of your read on these close losses, at least this year?
I think it's encouraging in one respect, and it speaks to like Nebraska's talent and sort of how they've developed in the Big Ten. I think when Frost got here, in fairness to their staff, they were not Big Ten prepared in the trenches at all.
Okay.
Like they were just so undersized and outmanned, both on the D-line and O-line. I feel like now when they step on the field at those spots, they can hang with people or be better. I mean, Michigan State, I don't know if you watched the second half of that game, but it was the most bizarre loss you ever saw. Nebraska takes the lead, does not give up a first down in the second half. Like, the defense plays just outstanding football where they allow like 13 yards of offense. I think they shut Kenneth Walker down to 65 yards for the game. And their punter kicks it the wrong way. Everybody's covering to the right side. He kicks it to the left side on a shank, and the guy walks in on a 60-yard jog for a touchdown.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that where there's always something that pops up, but yet you look at the talent and I wouldn't be shocked on Saturday if Nebraska makes Ohio State fight for it a little bit. I wouldn't at all, because they're that type of team and they've actually got the talent. They're sort of a scary team in a way for a big favorite to play, because they aren't as bad as their record. And so you have to convince your team, I think, we're not playing your typical 3-6 team. Because if you look at Nebraska's schedule right now in the latest playoff poll, they've played Michigan State was 3, Ohio State's obviously 5, Michigan 7, Oklahoma's 8. I mean, after this Saturday, they'll have played 4 of the top 8 teams in the playoff poll. So I do factor that in when talking about this team. What's difficult, though, is they have a loss to Illinois. They have a loss at Minnesota, where they just played a trash first half and really opened the door on Minnesota's season that didn't need to be open, to be frank about it. Nebraska not only has hurt themselves, but they've elevated some of these teams in the West that I just don't think they've got all the parts, but they beat Nebraska in that key week, and it's kind of vaulted their season in the meanwhile.
It's interesting that you say that about, kind of looking past the record. I think that was really Ryan Day's message when he met with us this week, that, I obviously, speaking to the media, he wants it to resonate with his players. So we'll be interested to see if that happens on Saturday morning, I guess, in Lincoln, technically. Those of you in the comment section, if you have questions for Brian as we talk, feel free to post them about Nebraska. Let's get into some more specifics on this year's team. We'll start with Adrian Martinez. Ohio State fans know him. Big Ten fans know him. He's been around for what seems like forever. Where do you kind of put him in the pecking order with Big Ten quarterbacks? Obviously, a guy who can use his legs. I think most people think of that more than they think of his arm. But how has he developed? What have you seen from him this year?
Yeah, I'm sure he's one of those guys who feels like he's a ninth-year senior.
It's like JT Barrett here.
Yeah. He's sort of like a microcosm of the whole team, where there's moments where you're like, well, that looks really good. I mean, he had a stretch in this season, probably after the Illinois game and for about 4 or 5 weeks, where I would have said he was one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. He was playing that good of football. He was really keeping his team in games. His O-line was a little bit clunky, and he would have these plays where he'd, scramble out and, make a 40-yard run on a play that should have been a 10-yard loss, stuff like that. So he has parts to his game where I'm sure he keeps defensive coordinators up at night, because he has all the stuff in his toolkit. Like he can make all the throws. He can keep a play alive and extend it with his feet. So he's one of those guys coaches worry about. The problem is his own fan base worries about him too, because he is inclined to make that, those 2 or 3 plays a game that you just can't have. And he's coming off, to be honest, probably one of the worst games of his Husker career. He had 4 interceptions against Purdue. He just looked off. I think he's a little banged up, and I think it's taking away his run game a little bit now. Maybe he'll prove that wrong on Saturday. I don't know. They kind of need him to be a runner, so they need to try that out a little bit. But there's so much that revolves around him and his decision-making. And he's put Nebraska in situations to win some of these games, and then in the clutch moments, it just hasn't worked out for him. Like Michigan. Played a brilliant game against Michigan most of the night. Nebraska has the ball with 3 minutes left, chance to go win it, tied up. Kind of a tough luck play, but that's sort of been the story. He fumbles when he thinks his progress is dead. Michigan wins. It's stuff like that just sort of pops up.
Yeah, the Michigan game, I think Ohio State played at noon that day, so that was one of the ones I was able to watch pretty closely live. Yeah, it was amazing to kind of give that up there. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, who are some other weapons that Ohio State fans need to be aware of on this offense for Nebraska going into this game?
Yeah, they've got they've got some good developing receivers. Xavier Betts is a young player who can really take the top off of defense, and he's sort of been inconsistent, but he's after the bye week a couple weeks ago, it seems like they want him to be more part of the plans. I would expect him to get a lot of action. Omar Manning I mean, he looks like an NFL receiver when you see him out there. He's, that just a 6'4", 220-pound guy. And he can run pretty well. He's tough in space. He hasn't had just that breakout game yet where he's had 110 yards or something.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that, you got to be aware of. And Nebraska has really good tight ends. Austin Allen is a junior, he's technically a junior. He's just like a senior now. I think he'll go to the NFL probably. 6'7" target. Their running backs aren't bad. They got a Ramir Johnson's a guy who was fifth string to start the year. And by the Oklahoma game, he popped up and nobody expected it. And now he's been the man. And I have no complaints about his game. He does everything pretty well. I'm not saying he's a, all conference player by any means, but he's a solid back. And Jacquez Yant's a real big back, like a 235, 240 guy, who has pretty good feet too. I'll be interested if they dust him off a little bit more. He had 6 carries for 60 yards against Purdue, but he sort of just disappeared in that game. And part of it was the O-line was stinking it up, but that's been their Achilles heel to me is the offensive tackles on this offense. And so that's where I think Nebraska fans are ducking for cover a little bit. Can they protect, and can Adrian make, smart decisions when he's being hassled like he might be?
Well, you just answered one of the questions there from one of our commenters about what do you expect from Nebraska's O-line versus Ohio State's D-line. It's been interesting. Ohio State's defensive line was kind of maligned early in the season, and it has come on of late. Kind of ran things in the second half against Penn State last week. So that's a matchup I'm always curious about is how they come out in games. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Nebraska, obviously a tough task. You've got an Ohio State offense ranked first in the country. I don't know how much of the Buckeyes you've watched this year, but is there anything in particular when Ohio State's offense is on the field, Nebraska's defense is on the field that worries you the most about this game?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because Ohio State's so gifted on that side of the ball that they're great on third down. I mean, great offenses are on the money down, but I think they're third in the country. And Nebraska's not been an eyesore there, but they're like 40th or something like that. And against Purdue, I really felt like they couldn't get off the field in the key moments. I mean, they gave up a bunch of third and mediums, third and longs, where if you get off on one of those plays, you possibly win that game. So that's the spot where Nebraska's defense is good. They're a good unit. They can be great at times. They were great against Michigan State second half, like we brought up earlier, where they didn't give up a first down, and they play really well together. So that's a unit where they're a confident bunch, and they've gone against Oklahoma. They've gone against some good teams, and so they're excited. They like playing these type of offenses. But I do wonder about Nebraska's secondary in this game, even though they have some experience. They're playing a younger guy at one of the safety spots, Miles Farmer, who's making just his second start of the season because one of their super seniors got injured. So that's something to watch. Cam Taylor-Britt's a very good cornerback. On the other side, they're developing, and they've looked pretty good most of the year. But Quentin Newsome and Braxton Clark are the name of those two guys, and they're going to have just probably the best games of their career on Saturday to give Nebraska a chance. What the Huskers have done well at is making explosive offenses have to dink and dunk them a little bit. Like Oklahoma's biggest play of the day was 23 yards. Now that was when Spencer Rattler was QB and he was scuffling a little bit, but still, Oklahoma's weapons. They got some guys, and they never took the top off Nebraska's defense. And for the most part, that just hasn't happened this season. Now that's where I'm curious, is Ohio State just another level where we do see that happen, where you see a couple 45, 50 yarders that just take this game and put it completely in Ohio State's grip? I think that's possible, but that's something I'm watching for because Nebraska hasn't yielded a lot of those just house call type plays this season. And so they've made teams have to drive the field and not make mistakes.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting, especially after Penn State did a pretty solid job. Does Ohio State bounce back? Does Nebraska take some of what Penn State was able to do? It's always interesting when you come off a game where the offense struggles a little bit, how that responds. One name you didn't mention, and we sort of touched on him before we started here, but Tyreke Johnson. He was at Ohio State, the cornerback, 5-star kid, never really got going at Ohio State. Transferred to Nebraska. I know you told me before the show he's played a little bit, some special teams, things like that. I've had some Buckeye fans ask, so what do you know about Tyreke Johnson, and what's the latest with him?
Yeah, it's a good question, Patrick, because I believe he's been nicked up a little bit. It's been kind of quiet on that front, though. He early on in the season, you were hearing about him in camp, especially like, maybe he could challenge for the 2 deep, something like that. He was going to at least be a special teams guy. I think he popped up in a couple games here and there, but he really has not been a story. And I do believe, injury is part of it. Also, they have some young corners they really like too. So, I mean, I don't know if it's also a deal where early on, he was just losing out to some guys that have been in the system a little bit longer and things like that. I'm not by any means saying to close the book on his Husker career here or anything like that. It's just been a sort of a season that hasn't really went the street light hasn't even turned green yet. It doesn't feel like on that one. So I don't know what's going to happen there. Nebraska fans I know he didn't have a huge career at Ohio State by any means, but Nebraska fans were so just enthused when he was, joining them from the portal to get a guy who is that type of a big star recruit. It's a good spot though for Nebraska on the field, so that's part of it. There is a little bit of a log jam in front of him, so maybe he's a year away.
Yeah, interesting career. I mean, I think Ohio State fans, 5-star kid, when he got to Columbus, everyone thought he was going to be one of those next cornerbacks to then, do well and then go on to the NFL, and just never took off. And it sounds similar to what we were saying about him a couple years ago to what you're saying there. So interesting. I'll be interested to see what ends up happening with Tyreke. I'll get you out on this one. The big thing when you hear about Nebraska fans is this sellout streak at Memorial Stadium. And I know there were some issues earlier in the year with donors having to buy some tickets and things like that. But what does this mean to the program? The fact that they've been able to sustain this even in some down times. And what do you expect the crowd to be like Saturday? I know it's an earlier game, but what Buckeye fans that are coming to Lincoln, to Memorial Stadium, what should they expect for those who haven't been?
It's still one of the great cathedrals in college football, as is whenever I go to the Horseshoe. I just think of that. The Horseshoe is one of my top 3 stadiums I've been in. I wouldn't want to rank them right now, but it's one of my favorites in the Big Ten. I think there's some similarities to Memorial Stadium and the Horseshoe, actually, when you're inside it, that fans will see. And it's got that, you can tell, there's been updates, but it still has that feel, which I appreciate in a stadium, that I'm in a stadium that was here in 1928, or whatever. And fans are, Nebraska fans are often said to not be realistic, I guess, that they live in the 90s and all that. And I don't think that's always a fair attribute given to them. Honestly, what they want right now is a team that wins 7 games and gets to a bowl game, and then let's take another step from there. It's not like they're asking for the world here. So when Ohio State fans who are on the trip encounter them, I think they're going to meet a humble, friendly bunch right now who is pretty honest about where their football team is. There's a lot of questions they'll hear in the air about what Scott Frost's future is, and if he should come back and all that. So there's that sort of a vibe right now, which makes it a little uncomfortable, I guess. I think Nebraska is going to have to make some plays in that first quarter to kind of juice the fans up. And the sellout streak you mentioned is interesting because it does exist technically. There's some people think it's now being a little artificially inflated because they're buying tickets for, it's a good cause, but they're buying tickets for kids who can't usually go to the games, and donors are doing that. And so it's maybe not quite the same as it has been. So there's some people are saying, just let that streak end. Let's admit it's over. There's others who really value it. It's one of the last, great streaks of Husker football. So it's a great fan base. I mean, it'll still be a mostly full stadium, seats and butts in seats. And they appreciate power programs like Ohio State too. I mean, Nebraska fans, they still view themselves as one of those helmets in college football. And I know when their team plays another of those helmets that everybody recognizes, it's a really big deal to them. So I think it's always cool when the band plays the other team's fight song before the game, and you hear one of those fight songs that you just know in college football, like Ohio State. You're like, okay, this is this is why you're here, to watch games like these and cover games like these, even if one of the teams isn't having as good a season.
Yeah, my experience visiting there has always been great. I remember walking up, either our first or second time there, walking from wherever we parked, and a couple different tailgates stopped us. It was like, you guys need anything? You want some food? You want some drinks? It's like, no, we got to get over to the press box. But the reputation of super friendly fans certainly exists. And I think Ohio State fans would take some donors buying some seats. There was a game with like 77,000 people earlier this year. One last thing real quick. Ed Rogers asked for your score prediction. I don't know if you've done that yet, but just your thoughts on how the game plays out.
No, that's fine. I wrote down Ohio State 38, Nebraska 23. Some might think that's a little friendly to Nebraska. I don't know. Like I said earlier, Nebraska is one of those teams where if I'm on the other side, I'm just a little uneasy, because I've seen that they can play with good teams, and their defense, Nebraska's defense, is what could keep them in this game and make Ohio State really have to earn it into the second half. Because when that unit is really working well together, they are a top tier group. Now the offense has trouble. Nebraska's offense moves the football, but they have trouble finishing and getting out of their own way. So that's the question. If Nebraska happened to have one of those Saturdays on offense where they got out of their own way and didn't turn it over, and the defense is dialed in, it could be a good game. So I'll go kind of in the middle of not saying it's going to be down to the wire or just the mess that it was 2 years ago. I think when Ohio State came in here, when game day was here, and just ripped Nebraska apart. And I know that Ohio State team wanted to show everybody on a national stage, like, we're a top tier team, because there were some questions at that moment about Justin Fields and all that. I think Ohio State will be motivated, though, because of the playoff poll and all that. So I expect they'll be ready.
All right, Brian. Well, thank you very much. Everybody who tuned in here live or listened afterwards, we appreciate it. If you don't mind, like and subscribe or whatever the vehicle is on whatever platform you're listening. Brian, thanks again. We'll see you in Lincoln. And everyone else, I hope you enjoy the game this weekend. Steve and I will be back after the game, recapping and everything like we do. So we hope you all tune in. Brian, appreciate it once again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Patrick.
For sure.